Okay. Hello, Dr. Davis.
Hi, Mike. Good to see you again.
Good to see you too. It's actually an honor to talk to you. I've been admiring your work about 3 years now. First, I heard about you, I think it was 2022 in April. So it's been exactly 3 years. I was listening Donna Schwenk, the Cultured Food Life interview with you. And first, I thought this bacteria and yogurt, uh, it's not necessary because I was fermenting all sorts of ferments, kefir and vegetables and meat. I ferment everything. And why would I add another thing, but also requires a special machine to secure that 100 degrees temperature? I was not interested at all. And I almost put that idea on the side, like, no. And I should achieve all the benefits from my ferments, tons of different bacteria, tons. Why would I need that very particular Reuteri or Gastrai or whatever? I thought, no. But then I was still curious and I thought, I will try. And luckily, I found my on my oven the setting. Oh, I can use my oven, 100 degrees, no problem. I don't need additional machine. Great, because in the kitchen counter, not enough space. And I made it. Reuteri was my first. And instantly, I felt, as soon as I put it in my mouth, that's something different because my tongue felt cleaner, my teeth felt cleaner, and it was like sizzling and happy feeling. And 3 years ago, I had COVID and recovery was really bad. My hair fell off. I had no energy. I felt awful, awful. And like few days after eating that yogurt, I started feeling really good. My hair started growing back, my energy started coming back, and all these uncomfortable feelings started just fading away. And then I was believer. Like it took me and vivid dreams instantly. I had vivid dreams also. And then I converted to believer.
You make an excellent point, Mai, and that is the distinction between microbes that you get through fermented foods. These are typically microbes that ferment at room temperature, like 7 degrees Fahrenheit or so. What is that? That's about 30 degrees Celsius, I think, something like that. And microbes that ferment at human body temperature or the body temperature of mammals, since we're mammals, right? So those are two distinct and different kinds of microbes. I tell people that because it helps people understand why we take these extra steps to ferment these human body temperature microbes. So if you tried to ferment, say, Reuteri, Lactobacillus reuteri, at room temperature, you won't get anything. It doesn't reproduce itself at room temperatures. You have to use that higher, but it also highlights the fact that these are microbial species that have evolved to live in your body. There's this they can't live on the kitchen counter. They can't live in a pond. They can't live in sauerkraut. They have to live in a mammal's body, specifically our bodies. So that clarifies why you fermented foods. I know you're wonderful at fermenting foods. And that's very important. Those microbes from fermented food are very Leuconostoc mesenteroides, Pediococcus pentasaceus, Pediococcus acidilactici, Weisella species.
Variety. And I thought, why is
Yes.
single bacteria in our gut? How many different strains we have? Like hundreds of different strains of different microbes. And
Well,
why
the curious
few particular ones?
The curious thing is those species of fermented foods in your sauerkraut or kimchi or fermented veggies, they don't take up residence in the human gastrointestinal tract. They pass right through. So, of course, the first thing, well, what good are they then? Well, they are incredibly good because even though they only pass through and don't stay, they cultivate the proliferation of beneficial species. And that's the wonderful thing about fermented foods, that you can eat some sauerkraut, say, that has, let's say, Leuconostoc,
Mhm.
uh, but as a result, you get proliferation of Akkermansia and Faecalibacterium and Ruminicaceae and Lactobacillus, the beneficial species. And it's not quite clear how this works because, we can't create life. Remember the old saying you can't get rats out of a pile of rags.
True.
You can't create life. So somehow the consumption of fermented foods allows the uh, hidden sequestered microbes living in the mucus barrier to proliferate. And so you get those microbes of fermented foods, and then as a result, you get proliferation of all those beneficial microbes, um, probably because they were hiding in very small numbers in the mucus lining.
Right. And I was thinking, how do we even know when we have healthy microbiome? I know one way is to test, but tests may or may not be so accurate. Some are better than others, but how do we know without testing that we are strong and healthy? Like how should we feel?
Tough question, Mike, because as you know, stool testing is rectal testing. That is, it's the last inch or so of your rectum. It's not testing the ascending colon or the transverse colon or the ileum or the jejunum. It's just a sample of the poop just as it exits. So, a
Exactly,
friend of
but
mine,
it's
Dr.
everywhere. It's not only there. But
Right.
I think skin reflects good microbiome. Skin is nice and plump and healthy. I think this smell after using bathroom, like babies poop don't smell that bad. I think ours shouldn't be too stinky either. And when I have many guests, some I think have terrible microbiome. Luckily, they know me. I give them this and that, and it gets a little better. And I think overall, we should, like, if we have a good microbiome, we should then sleep deeply. We should wake up happily and, full of joy and life and feeling good overall.
Absolutely. So a lot of modern world problems, crime, brutality, violence, anger, hate, depression, suicide, not all of it to do with the microbiome. It disrupts, of course not. Humans have been killing each other for as long as humans have been around. But I think it's gotten worse. It's spread to even children. There's a lot of anxiety, hatred, all that kind of stuff. Now, a lot of it, not all of it, a lot of it is due to disrupted microbiome. And of course, Reuteri is at the top of the list of things that fall into this category of so-called psychobiotics, things that influence the way you behave, your internal dialogue, the way you treat and relate to other people. That's the great thing about Reuteri, of course. So we know that Reuteri, two reasons why Reuteri has such beneficial effects on human behavior. One, of course, is the signal it sends through the vagus nerve, retrograde, upward, to the brain to release the hormone oxytocin. Now, lots of people know the hormone oxytocin as the hormone of delivery, of delivery of a child.
Or petting
That's why if you,
kittens.
hmm?
Or petting kittens.
Yeah, so people say, oh, if you hug your pet or your spouse, you get a surge in oxytocin. Yeah, for a few seconds. But
Yeah.
the kind of surge in oxytocin you get from Reuteri is much more around the clock. It's much more of an important effect. And of course, oxytocin is the hormone of love and empathy. So there's a greater intensity of love and affection for other people. There's a need for human connection. There's an increase in generosity, and there's an increase in the acceptance of other people's opinions. So important now. And of course, it's a microbe we've all lost. But
And
that's oxytocin
exactly. And
effect.
how many people have Reuteri in these days? Only very few percent of people. No
The
wonder
best
that
evidence
things are like they are.
is 4%. So almost nobody has it. Less than about 1 in 25 people now has it because it's very susceptible to common antibiotics. So, and in the US, by age 40, most of us have gotten 30 courses of antibiotics for one reason or another. And lactobacillus species, very susceptible, so it dies. We've lost it, even though it's ubiquitous, of course, in hunter-gatherer human populations unexposed to antibiotics. It's ubiquitous in wild mammals. They all have it. If we went to the jungles of New Guinea, people who are a couple of generations away from headhunting and cannibalism, they all have Reuteri. If we went to the jungles of Brazil, the Yanomami, for instance, they all have Reuteri. It's us in the modern world, overexposure to antibiotics and probably other factors that have caused us to lose it. But so a lot of the effects of Reuteri are through oxytocin. But I also call oxytocin the hormone of body composition, where fat is located and how much muscle you maintain. So the loss of muscle is a major issue as we age. We lose about a third of our musculature, sometimes as much as 50% of our musculature as we age. And loss of muscle accelerates your path to falls, fractures, frailty, loss of independence, and earlier death. So that evidence has become very strong now. Now, I mention this because we live in this world where there's this really stupid movement of giving people GLP-1 agonist drugs.
Yes.
So, of course, in the US, people are taking Mounjaro, Wegovy, Ozempic, Zepbound, drugs to lose weight. Well, how do those drugs work? Well, they cause you to take in less calories, less food. So, just like cutting calories in a diet, or just like a bariatric procedure where they make your stomach smaller by bypass or by a band or whatever, lap band. So these are all variations in the same method, a reduction in calories. And we know now with good confidence, there are numerous studies now, a total of 50,000 people, such as the NHANES data from the National Institutes of Health in the US, the Epic Norfolk data from Western Europe, and other databases, about 50,000 people. We now know with confidence, if you lose weight by cutting calories, you're going to die several years younger
Yes.
because of the loss of muscle. So preservation of muscle is so important. Well, guess what? Reuteri provokes a return of youthful musculature. You know, when I first did this, about 7 years ago or so, in my early 60s,
Yes.
I gained 13 pounds of muscle in 3 weeks, and my strength increased by 50%. And I don't know
Very
about you,
hard to gain muscle. It's very hard to gain muscle.
very
That's
hard.
impossible. That amount is impossible in normal circumstances.
And you know what? I was going to the gym once a week for 15 minutes because I don't know about you, I can't stand the gym. I hate it.
I hate it too. And after the accident, I had to go. And I asked the physical therapist, like, because I lost a lot of muscle, it was visible after the hospital, how fast I will recover, how fast I get the muscle back. He said, like a couple pounds a year in normal circumstances, working out in a health club. That
So
is
that's one of
not
the effects, of course, of Reuteri is a restoration of youthful musculature. So we're doing the exact opposite of what those people are doing in the GLP-1 agonist world and bariatric procedure, et cetera. So the medical system, the healthcare system, pharmaceuticals have done nobody a favor by propagating these drugs. People think it's great because they lose all this weight, not recognizing they're going to die younger. So I'm waiting for the class action suits to start against the pharmaceutical industry when people realize not only do you die younger, but your last few years are characterized by falls, fractures, frailty, loss of independence, and all the diseases that accompany those things. Type 2 diabetes, dementia,
I was
heart disease.
about to say, I have few friends who take it, and talking to them, it feels like they're young in 30s, 40s, 50s. They're demented. They're not same anymore. It affects the brain too, unfortunately.
It's a mess that the pharmaceutical and my colleagues have created because they're not thinking it through. So there's a lot of these kinds of things going on. But you and I have a solution. Don't take the damn drugs. And of course, we do this in the context of a program. We have a diet program, of course, but it's not a diet for weight loss. But as you know, weight loss happens as a wonderful side effect. It's a program for restoration of health. So you don't get heart disease, dementia, and breast cancer, and type 2 diabetes, and hypertension, all that kind of stuff. And you're happier. You're a nicer person. You like other people better. Your libido goes up. Men experience about a 50% rise in testosterone. Older females experience a return of vaginal moisture and sensation. There's an amplification of the immune response. There's smoother skin with fewer wrinkles. Come on.
And just those few bacteria make a tremendous difference. And if medications have typically, or actually almost always, negative side effects, this has so many positive side effects. And we can make it at home so affordably. Yeah. And I
And
was
my, of course, that's one microbe. That's only one microbe.
just one.
I think it is the most interesting among microbes that we've lost. But there are others, as you know. There's other microbes with very interesting effects. It might be effects on infants, like Bifidobacterium infantis, unique to the first year of life. It could be Lactobacillus crispatus, essential for vaginal and urinary health, and probably prostate health too. It could
That's
be
interesting.
microbes that pass.
Men's health too.
Mhm. That's a really interesting question, by the way. Prostate disease, miserably under appreciated because it was thought, for instance, if a guy has a hard time passing urine because his prostate has enlarged, benign prostatic hypertrophy, or he's got urinary urgency from prostatitis, the solution, of course, is take your prostate out or drill a hole in it or drugs that have all kinds of nasty side effects. Well, what about the microbiome? The rectum is right there. If you want to examine someone's prostate gland, I wouldn't advise that, but if you did, you put a finger and the prostate's right there, right in the rectum. It's a couple of millimeters away from the rectal microbiome. But the crazy thing about the prostate is I call it the grand central station of the microbiome. Because if you look at the microbes that live in the prostate's filled with microbes. What are you going to find? You're going to find oral microbes like Porphyromonas gingivalis and Fusobacterium nucleatum. You're going to find rectal microbes, of course. You're going to find skin microbes like Cutibacterium, the species that causes acne. In other words, you find all these crazy microbes that come from other parts of the body. And SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, major player in prostate disease. That is, fecal microbes that have invaded the small intestine where they don't belong. And when they die, they release their toxic compounds into the bloodstream. That's called endotoxemia. And that's how the gastrointestinal microbiome that has invaded the small intestine can be experienced as anxiety or dementia in the brain, or as a skin rash like rosacea or psoriasis, or as joint pain like fibromyalgia. In other words, we now know with confidence that the gastrointestinal microbiome has a way to export these effects to all parts of the body, including the prostate, and in females, the uterus, cervix, vagina. So it can be responsible for premature labor, for instance, which, as you know, is catastrophic. If a woman delivers a child at 28 weeks, that child, that person will be impaired for a lifetime, neurologically, immunologically, psychologically. So it's not a small matter. And one of the factors playing into this is the invasion of fecal microbes into the small intestine. So if people start to recognize this, because in the US alone, there's at least conservatively estimated, 150 million people with this condition. It's the largest epidemic ever in the history of our species on this planet.
Yes, I've been testing. I have that air device too. What do you recommend? I've been testing myself. I used to have SIBO, no more. And I've been testing my friends and people who want me to test them. Hundreds of people. Most people have it.
Yes.
Yes.
Years ago, I thought SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, I thought it was rare until that device came out,
And doctors
2008.
typically don't test it. They don't think about it. And their solutions are not so good.
You touched upon another hot button mine, that is the ignorance, the profound ignorance of the medical system. So if you went to your doctor, I can't speak for Estonia, but in the US, and say, "Hey doc, I think I have SIBO." He says, "Oh yeah, sure, Mai. You talk to Dr. Google again?" Or, "No, you don't. There's nothing wrong with you. It's in your head." Or some other ridiculous answer. Because what they're saying in effect is I can't be bothered to educate myself about these kinds of things. So I'm going to make fun of you. It sounds awful, right? But this is certainly how the American medical system works. They don't want to embrace health because it doesn't make any money. It must make money for them to take an interest. So it must involve pharmaceuticals and or procedures in a clinic or health or a hospital.
And testing in here in Estonia is like 390 euros. And that machine is like, I don't remember, $160. And you can test all the friends and all the people.
And use it over and over and over. And we should point out it's great to have the air device. It confirms a lot of things, but people don't really need to do that. They can if they want. I find it especially helpful if there's a recurrence. Because when you have SIBO, let's say your symptoms are bloating and diarrhea, and maybe rheumatoid arthritis. You eradicate your SIBO, but 6 months later you have a panic attack or some other effect. You say, is this SIBO or what? Well, you can test. So I find that's where the air device really helps. And as you point out, you pay once, you don't have to pay again. Whereas a clinic or lab, you have to pay every single time. Not to mention, it takes about 4 to 6 hours to get it done in a clinic. It takes minutes in your kitchen,
But
right?
it's very convenient little device. Yes.
So as you know, we've been doing something called SIBO yogurt.
Yes.
That is, so simple rationale. If you and I had SIBO and we took a probiotic, a commercial probiotic, what's the likelihood that SIBO would go away? About zero.
Yes.
So I asked some different questions. I asked, well, what if we chose species that are known to colonize the small intestine? That's where SIBO occurs, and produce bacteriocins, natural antibiotics that kill fecal microbes like E. coli and Klebsiella. So we make this as what I call SIBO yogurt. We either co-ferment all three, there's three microbes, or you can individually ferment, it's up to you. And that has worked about 90% of the time. It's superior to the antibiotic. There's a conventional antibiotic called Xifaxan or rifaximin. That's, if the doctor even knows what SIBO is, they'll prescribe this Xifaxan. And the track record of Xifaxan is about 55 to 60% effectiveness. So we're talking about something you make in the comfort of your kitchen that looks and smells like yogurt. It's not yogurt, of course, but it looks and smells like yogurt. And so far, we're witnessing about a 90% effectiveness in eradicating SIBO.
Amazing. And no negative side effects. Easy, affordable, and effective. What else do we need? And it's not only for SIBO, it helps for so many different health problems.
Yeah, good point, Mike. I regret calling it SIBO yogurt because it makes it seem like it's only useful for that. No, it's what it is really. It's a restoration of lost keystone foundational species. But if I called it restoration of lost keystone species yogurt,
Yes. Yes.
so I actually encourage people. So take it for 4 weeks, sometimes longer for really bad SIBO. Get your SIBO under control.
Longer, few months even.
Mm-hmm. People who've taken a lot of antibiotics, for instance, it may take them months to recover something closer to normal microbiome. And then consume it intermittently, maybe 3 times a week or so, 2 or 3 times a week. Because one, SIBO loves to come back. And two, you get all those other benefits, smoother skin, reduction of
easily come back.
wrinkles.
If you eat something not so good for you, it comes easily back.
Mm-hmm. At least until we figure out a way to make this microbe and other microbes take up permanent residence. But no one knows how to do that yet. It's probably a question of what microbes have to be restored along with Reuteri. Maybe there's, I don't know, half a dozen other species that have to be replaced along with Reuteri to allow it to take up permanent residence. But we still don't know what that looks like.
Yes. And it will be convenient to have SIBO capsules also with all these three different microbes.
Well, you raise a question that I think about a lot.
And some people do not tolerate dairy at all. Of course, there are other options to make it, but it would be also convenient to have capsules. I mean, it's basically possible to take all these three capsules daily too. Would it have a similar effect? Of course, SIBO yogurt has higher count of bacteria versus capsules, but would it be effective?
Well, that's a great uncertainty and something I think about a lot. So if we take Reuteri by itself, for instance, and then use this method of prolonged fermentation, 36 hours at human body temperature, when we count the microbes using a method called flow cytometry, we get 300 billion with a B.
No capsule has that.
Per 120 milliliter serving. So do we need 300 billion to eradicate SIBO? No one's done that study. One of the other challenges, if we wanted to put 300, let's just say 300 billion in a capsule, it'd be very expensive. And if there's three microbes, you're talking about probably north of about $500 to $1,000 a month. So very expensive. Microbes are expensive. That's
If
why
the
making it
yogurt,
yogurt,
we can make a cost of half and half.
right? It's so
$50.
inexpensive.
And we get a
So,
huge count.
so but you expose a big area of uncertainty in microbiome, and that is dose response.
And that
For
can be
instance,
very different because people are very different. Who's sicker needs more,
mhm,
longer periods. So how do we know exactly? We cannot know exactly.
we're trying to fund those studies. You know, we're not the pharmaceutical industry that rips people off for billions of dollars, so we don't have the kind of budget that the pharmaceutical industry has. And dose response studies are very expensive to do. In other words, if we really want to know how many microbes it takes to eradicate SIBO, we'd have to do a study with placebo, 10 billion, 50 billion, 100 billion, 500 billion, a trillion, and then assess the response. Not impossible, it's easy science, but very expensive. So we're trying to do some of that, but we're doing it just piecemeal. So for now, my forgive the pun, my gut sense
Mhm.
is that it's probably about 30, 40, 50 billion per day where you start to get these positive effects. Is there any additional benefit to 100, 200, 300? Don't know.
So half a cup a day will give that health
So a
effect.
half a cup a day or 120 milliliters per day is what we've been using. We're trying to not overexpose people to dairy. Dairy has some issues. And as you know, we've minimized the problems with dairy by this prolonged fermentation. So the lactose is converted to lactic acid. So people who have lactose intolerance can almost always eat the yogurt with no problem. And that level of lactic acid makes it kind of sour or tart, reduces the pH to about 3.5. And as you recall, the pH is a logarithmic scale. Conventional yogurt has to have a pH of 4.6 or lower. So the yogurt that we're making, the Reuteri yogurt or other with this prolonged fermentation, is tenfold more acidic than conventional yogurt. And that level of acidity from the lactic acid breaks down or denatures the casein beta A1 that is the most problematic form of casein that has been associated with autoimmune diseases. So we break it down by this prolonged fermentation, acidification, pH 3.5. So there are issues with dairy. We've minimized a lot of the problems. You can go even further. When you make the yogurt and it separates into curds, solid, and whey, liquid, you can pour the whey off. You can save it as a starter for your next batch, or you can just discard it. And that way you've reduced the effect of whey that provokes insulin, which in some people causes weight gain or blocks weight loss. You can pour it off, or you can strain it like to make Greek yogurt, or as you have done, make
I've
cheese.
been testing in Estonia lactose-free heavy cream to make yogurt. I did not test that in Chicago. I don't know. I didn't find it in the store. I wasn't thinking about it. Phenomenal results. Amazing. Lactose-free dairy actually tastes way better than regular. It tastes sweeter. I don't know why, but it tastes way better and always comes out perfect.
Interesting. Very
Yeah.
interesting.
I'm not sure. Have you tested that too? Lactose-free?
No, and I would have predicted that you had to add sugar to replace the lactose,
I
but
add
it's you
inulin.
gotta.
I always add inulin for lactose-free and ferments nicely, but it just tastes even better.
You are a great experimenter. Now, I've not tried it. But very interesting, Mike. Very interesting.
I'm sure they have in Chicago area too, lactose-free heavy cream. I wasn't particularly looking there, but I'm sure it's possible to find it.
I bet you're right.
You can test it too. Yes. And then I wanted to ask how microbiota affects us. Like microbiome is what's inside of us, and microbiota is what's outside of us. So how does that affect us? Like many people live in these days in cities. We are less connected to nature, and we're using more chemicals versus natural stuff. So how does that affect our bacteria?
That question's only recently been explored, like the study from Finland, where kids in a daycare center, they were allowed to play on concrete or on grass. And the kids who played on grass had much superior health and microbiome composition. It's just a hint, but you make an excellent point. Living in an urban setting with pavement and concrete and asphalt and dirty air is really corrupt your health. It's the way humans should live, as you're living now, being outside, walking in the grass, walking in the woods, breathing better air, hopefully drinking better water. Yeah, it's just a return to the way things should have been all along. And that's, by the way, that's what we're doing with Reuteri. We're restoring a microbe that you should have had from your mom when you were born or breastfed. But you lost it, your mom lost it, you lost it. And so that's all we're doing. And by the way, that's the entire theme of my programs, is restoring things that you should have had all along. So Reuteri, we restore collagen and hyaluronic acid because we've been told stupidly in the US to cut your saturated fat and cholesterol, and it caused most modern people to abandon consumption of organ meats like brain and heart and tongue.
I
And
know
we
that.
therefore, Mhm. You're way ahead of the curve, Mai. You're way ahead. But most people don't. In fact, if you say to most Americans, hey, you should be eating more tongue and heart, they go, oh, disgusting, because they think food should come through a drive-through window. And so a return to those things, those have major effects on health and also body composition. The ladies get excited because when they learn that if you replace collagen and hyaluronic acid orally, not topically, you can do it topically too, but the real effects come when you consume these things orally, and you get smoother skin. And you rebuild joint cartilage, and it shrinks abdominal fat and encourages a return of youthful muscle. So a lot of what we're doing is really addressing the distortions, the modern distortions of shape and body composition. And of course, we do this in a grain-free, wheat and grain-free diet, restoration of other important nutrients lost because of modern life, vitamin D, magnesium, iodine, omega-3 fatty acids, not because we love supplements, but because modern life has caused us to be deprived of those very essential nutrients, like omega-3 fatty acids, supposed to come from eating brain and fish and shellfish. Well, no one wants to eat brain anymore. And fish and shellfish, industrialization has caused them to be contaminated by mercury and cadmium. So you can't eat all the fish you want. You can't eat all the shellfish you want. It's a worldwide problem. So we get omega-3 fatty acids to compensate. So this very simple idea of just replacing things humans should have had all along, and at the point you make, and we should be outside.
And gardening helps probably to restore many species and petty animals and walking in a nature.
Yes. Yes, excellent point. Yes.
Yes. So back to gardening.
Gardening. I think just, one of the nice consequences of the political disaster the US is experiencing and the huge escalation in grocery prices. A family of four is spending over $1,000 a month for groceries now. So what I hope it does is it causes people to question the need for processed, ultra-processed food. You don't need chips. You just need real food. I think it's also going to prompt a return to gardening, or at least buying from farmers and farmers markets rather than big supermarkets with cellophane wrapped food. So I think some good will come out of this disaster. I think a return to real eating, real food, and safer. If you grow food in your garden, of course, Mai, you know this, you're not going to spray glyphosate. You're not going to spray tons of herbicides and pesticides. You might put a fence around your garden to keep the deer and the rabbits out, but you're not going to spray crap on it.
I can tell you what I do with my compost. My compost is in that copper-looking kettle. I collect all the leftovers there. And once it's full, then I blend it in a blender over there, and then mixed with the water, blend in a blender. I also add ash from my oven. And then I use BioticQuest, that company, yield and shield soil probiotic mix, which I believe, the Volcano and they got it from amber. This somehow like that original bacteria, other bacteria too. So I just created that. I think technically it should work. And I blend it all. I put it in 2 buckets. I keep it in a room temperature about 2-3 days. And then I just dump it in the garden. And it looks just like a soil. And I get rid of my leftovers and I can improve the soil.
That is fantastic. Yeah, Dr. Raul Cano, as you know, 40-year academic microbiologist, a good friend of mine. And he's helped us out a lot with a lot of the things we're doing. And when he told me about his Ancient Organics company that's commercializing, probiotics for soil, brilliant, how brilliant. And he's increasing yield. He's helping convert conventionally farmed pesticide, herbicide filled soil back to organic. He's accelerating that process with these efforts. And it's so interesting.
And the reason why I did it, because when you buy that bottle, it's about $40. And it's about 1 gallon when you mix with the water. It's still a little pricey. It goes really fast. I'm like, how can I extend that? Like with the Reuteri, you just put it in a half and half and you get tons. And I use that yield and shield and I get tons of bacteria. And I don't know, does it like to eat that, what I offer? But I think it does. I certainly see clear fermentation. And it smells wonderful, a little sour.
I think you can do the same thing we do with yogurt. As you recall, we make the first batch from a probiotic, then we make subsequent batches from a little of a prior batch. I think you can do the same thing with soil. Use the probiotic to make your first batch, and then take some of the prior batch.
Exactly do.
Yeah.
And sometimes if I do not want to use whey, I dump that in there and eggshells. And this has not happened, but theoretically, if my yogurt goes bad, I can add that there too. And all those things. And one of my friends, she dumps the not so fresh yogurt to her chickens. And chickens started laying eggs in the wintertime, like they were in a summer program. In the wintertime, they usually have way less eggs, but not with yogurt.
Oh, that's interesting.
It's something for their system too.
You got to wonder, even though you probably don't give antibiotics to your cats,
No.
you got to wonder if they've somehow, because of all the things we're exposed to, antibiotics are a big factor, of course, but there's other things, especially in the US, glyphosate, the herbicide, is in the water, it's in the air, it's in your body.
Right.
Other herbicides, other pesticides, all food additives, chlorinated drinking water. I mean, we're flooded with this, we're bombarded with this things that disrupt the microbiome. And so even cats and dogs are not immune to that because they drink water, they breathe the same air we breathe. So you got to wonder how much they're exposed to and how much of their microbiome is disrupted as a result.
In Estonia and Finland, saunas are really popular. And I wonder, do we sweat out some of the toxins? We must sweat out some of the toxins. How about glyphosate? Can we sweat it out in a sauna? Small amounts at least?
Not to my knowledge, no one's looked at that. The only thing that's been looked at is heavy metal content of sweat. There's some Canadian studies showing, for instance, that mercury and cadmium, modest quantities are lost. No, what's no one managed to show yet is, does that lead to meaningful reductions in, say, blood levels, organ levels, tissue levels, urine levels? No one's done that yet. One really interesting thing, though, is that there appears to be microbes that consume glyphosate. So Raul Cano, our friend, and his business partner, Martha Carlin, that operate a company called Biotiquest, they have a strain of Lactobacillus plantarum that metabolizes glyphosate.
Is it the PS128 or something different?
I don't recall the strain right off the top of my head, but it's the strain that's contained in their Sugar Shift and some of their other products. Now, what no one has shown yet is if you include plantarum, Lactobacillus plantarum, a strain that metabolizes glyphosate, does that lead to a reduction in blood, urine, tissue levels of glyphosate. No one's done that study yet. So much of what we're doing here, Mike, is limited by budgets because we're not pharma. We don't charge you all kinds of crazy money and rip you off. That's the theme of the pharmaceutical industry, right? They rip you off like crazy. They persuade gullible doctors who think that drugs are the solution to health, and they end up charging you as a member of the public these extraordinary amounts, either as healthcare insurance or hospital fees or doctors, whatever. They rip you off, but that's how they fund their studies. When they perform studies, they spend like $20 million. Well, I don't have $20 million to pay for a study. We had maybe a couple of 100,000, which is a lot for small operations, for small projects. But we're trying to do it. But that's why we often don't have answers because, unfortunately, we live in a world, especially in the US, where if there's not a pot of gold at the end, no one can be bothered. So there's so many questions that you and I have, your listeners have, that we don't have answers. It'll come over time, but it's not available right away because budgets don't allow us to do it.
Do they teach about probiotics at the medical school and microbiome? I wonder.
My medical education was about 40 years ago. So I can only speak for what happened. But I can tell you, no, it's a rare doctor who can speak intelligently about the microbiome. I have my son and his wife, my daughter-in-law, are working on their third child. And my son, who hears what I have to say, he asked her obstetrician, "Hey, doc," just testing her, right? "Hey, doc, do you think there's any role for probiotics in pregnancy?" And she says, "Oh, no, they've been proven not to work."
I
Which
think
is,
I cannot get even pregnant without the right bacteria.
oh, it's so ignorant. So this is one of my beefs with my colleagues. They deliver misinformation and ignorance with authority. Rather than say, it's a good question. I don't know. I'm not really up to date on the science. If you know something, please educate me. They don't say that. They make fun of you. Oh, it doesn't work. It's stupid. Did you consult Dr. Google? When the reality is the microbiome is critical in pregnancy. A woman must have Lactobacillus crispatus in her birth canal, in her vaginal canal, because that controls vaginal moisture, the tone of the cervix. Because if you have inflammation in the cervix, it dilates and it can cause premature labor. A woman must have Lactobacillus reuteri because likewise it colonizes the vagina. It also colonizes breast milk. So a mother passes on reuteri to her child in breastfeeding, and it strengthens the maternal-infant bond, reduces risk for postpartum depression, and it facilitates breastfeeding because it causes the little muscles in breast tissue to squeeze out milk. So reuteri, for Splatus, two among the most important microbes for health of the mother and health of the child. Bifidobacterium infantis. A child must have Bifidobacterium infantis that comes to dominate the infant's microbiome, gastrointestinal microbiome.
Of babies' microbiome is infanticide. I read somewhere. Super important for babies.
Extremely important because if the child does not have Bifidobacterium infantis, it can't metabolize what are called human milk oligosaccharides from breast milk. And those human milk oligosaccharides are crucial for neurological maturation. So if a child gets breastfed and has infantis, it's healthier, it has a higher IQ, it's less likely to have asthma, type 1 diabetes, other autoimmune diseases, less likely to be obese or type 2 diabetic as an adolescent. Huge. If a child doesn't have infantis or doesn't breastfeed, it's impaired for a lifetime. So to say, oh, probiotics have been shown not to work is so profoundly ignorant. Yet this comes. That's an attitude held by a lot of my colleagues. So they're 40 years behind, sadly. And so, you and your listeners, you could say, well, I'm going to wait 40 years for my doctor to catch up. Well, good luck with that, right?
Some birth centers in Chicago actually test for infantis, but if they don't have a sufficient amount, they don't do anything about it. There's no suggestion. Okay, you don't have it. That's fine.
Yes, they're way behind. It's little by little starting to enter the mainstream, but it's nowhere near become a mainstream practice to address the microbiome. Now, what if the doctor could charge you $10,000 a month for the probiotic and he gets a big cut of it? Guess what? He'd be talking all about it all day long. That's so, by the way, like GLP-1 agonist drugs that are typically about $1,500 a month. Now, how does a doctor profit from that? Well, there's a number of ways. One way is the doctor's group forms its own pharmacy, and the doctor then prescribes the drug and gets, in effect, a large kickback. That's when they get excited about drugs, when there's money to be made. This is the corrupt American system where it's all about money, has nothing to do with health. But, okay, that means you and me and your listeners have to take the reins of health yourself. You can't rely on the doctor. The doctor doesn't know. And even worse, more often than not, the doctor doesn't care. They don't care to educate them
Doctors.
because there's no money in it. So maybe it'll take 40 years and the doctor will start to say, oh, maybe you're right. Maybe we should talk about the microbes. But no one wants to wait 40 or 50 years. So now, if we're talking about dangerous things, dangerous, expensive, okay, I understand. But we're not. We're talking about safe things that make you feel better, look better, inexpensive, a few dollars, a little bit of work, maybe a little bit of hassle, like sourcing the microbes.
Very
But
easy.
we're not talking about dangerous or expensive things.
And tremendous health effects and no negative side effects.
Yes. I've recently taken an interest in skin only because Reuteri is clearly a huge advantage in skin health. So our first clinical trial, for instance, in 25 women, we asked them, please don't change your diet, don't change your exercise program. Just it was 4 capsules a day of Lactobacillus reuteri, 40 billion per day, so relatively less than the yogurt, collagen peptides, hyaluronic acid, and astaxanthin, the carotenoid. That's the pink or orange in salmon and shrimp. And we did that for 3 months. That was a skin trial because, as you know, the ladies in my audience will say things like, oh, we're not that interested in muscle or libido. We just want better skin. Which I say, what? Okay, so just to validate the skin effects, we did a small clinical trial in ladies, did something called high resolution skin ultrasound to measure the thickness of the dermis. The dermal skin health comes from the dermal layer, not from the epidermis, the external. It's from the dermis below, about half a millimeter below the external skin. So we measure the thickness of the dermal layer, and we got a 15% increase in dermal thickness, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it's far more than anything else has ever accomplished. If you take collagen alone, you get about 6 to 7% increase in dermal thickness. So we got 15%. That's over 90 days, more probably over a longer time period. But we also saw their waists shrink by up to 21 centimeters. No change in diet. No change. And when I first saw it, I thought, no way. Come on. What? But they didn't lose weight. Why? How could you lose 21 centimeters off your waistline and not lose weight? Increase muscle. That's what we saw in animals. It's what we're all experiencing. Now, ladies will say, well, we don't want to look like Arnold Schwarzenegger. Well, don't worry, you won't. No one's going to look like Arnold Schwarzenegger, right? It's a restoration of youthful musculature that you've lost as you age. And if you made the mistake of losing weight by cutting calories, that also triggered muscle loss, it comes back. So we're starting another clinical trial. We will measure muscle by bioimpedance and some other measures also. But I think I stumbled on in the name of skin health. So it does improve skin health, but we're seeing this dramatic shift in what I call shape and body composition, a reduction in abdominal fat, restoration of youthful muscle. So, and so a lot of ways, Mike, reduction of fat, return of muscle, increased testosterone, increased vaginal moisture, smoother skin, less wrinkles. We're turning the clock back 10 or 20 years.
With very simple ways. And I use topically too. I make butter. Sometimes I ferment with a plantarum or reuteri. It's fantastic for the skin too. And all my friends who try, they can't believe it. It makes it so silky and so amazing. No moisturizer comes
Fantastic.
close to that. Nothing comes
Yeah.
close to that.
Rotary is an excellent mask. I have a recipe if
Skin
anybody's
is
interested.
acidic. So our moisturizer should be also
Yes.
acidic. And home
Excellent point.
a plantarum or reuteri butter is acidic. Fantastic for skin.
Very, very smart observation, Mai. That's exactly right. Healthy skin is acidic skin.
And all the
Uh,
soaps and what we put on our skin is alkaline. Not good at all. I don't think so.
yes. Excellent point. Excellent point. So one of the things I've been encouraging ladies to do is to ferment their rotary with a little bit of papaya. So we get a papaya, chop into cubes, and then puree it in your blender. Add a quarter, half cup, whatever, to your batch. You'll see wild fermentation, crazy fermentation. But the reason for adding papaya is it's the richest fruit in vitamin C. And topical vitamin C also stimulates collagen significantly. So it's just a fun way, and then you put it on as a mask, as you point out, just for a
Other
few
fruits
minutes.
have similar effect, maybe less, but similar.
What fruit?
Like if we add other fruit, let's say kiwi or cherries or what have higher vitamin C content.
Yeah, so it's not the fruit itself, it's not the polyphenols, it's the vitamin C that we know with good evidence is another way to stimulate dermal collagen production. Yeah, so it doesn't have to be papaya. Papaya just came to mind just because it's among the highest in vitamin C, but it doesn't have to be that.
Right, right. And what are the other most important keystone bacteria? I know Reuteri is our favorite. And what else is important? Like, let's say, person who doesn't know much about it, uh, where should they start? Perhaps, yeah.
Well, my two other favorites are Lactobacillus gasseri and Bacillus subtilis. And those are the three, Reuteri, gasseri, subtilis, that are included
I mean,
in the
it's only the
SIBO yogurt.
bacteria, right? And what else
Because,
glycerol does?
pardon me?
Like glycerol, what are the benefits of glycerol?
So gasseri, like Reuteri, has the unique capacity to colonize the small intestine. Very unusual. Even though there's two that do that, it's very unusual. Most don't do that. Most colonize the colon only. So Reuteri, gasseri colonize the small intestine. Both are champions at producing those bacteriocins. Natural antibiotics. Gasseri produces up to 7 bacteriocins, so very potent antibacterial effect. The Bacillus subtilis is a spore-forming microbe. So it germinates like a seed in the ileum, where it also produces bacteriocins. Now, the great thing about subtilis is that so Reuteri and gasseri produce bacteriocins effective largely against so-called gram-negative species, describing how they stain when you try to look at them under a microscope. So they kill things like E. coli and Klebsiella and Pseudomonas. But the bacteriocins of Bacillus subtilis kill those guys, but also kill the so-called gram-positive species like Staphylococcus, Streptococcus, and Enterococcus, because some people have their SIBO dominated by those microbes. So that combination of three gives you a full spectrum in eradicating as many bad microbes as possible. And the good thing about bacteria is they're smart. Microbes are smart. We don't think of them as being smart, but they've evolved to become smart. They don't kill each other. They kill only the bad guys, those fecal microbes. So those are three of the most important. There are many others. Now, there are microbes also that we want more of, but we can't cultivate. These are species like Fecalibacterium and Akkermansia because they die upon exposure to air.
Anaerobic. I started testing new bacteria. I know it's also, we cannot ferment that. Clostridium butyricum. What do you think of that?
So Clostridium has a PR problem because there's all kinds of species of Clostridium, like Clostridium perfringens is the cause of gas gangrene wounds in war. There's Clostridium botulinum that causes botulism and kills you because it paralyzes your muscle. There's Clostridium difficile that causes hemorrhagic enterocolitis after an antibiotic, and you have to take multiple courses of antibiotic. You can sometimes die of it. So Clostridium has a problem with its PR, but it conceals the fact that there are very beneficial species of Clostridium also, such as Clostridium butyricum. As the name suggests, it's a great producer of butyrate, the fatty acid butyrate, butyricum. And that butyrate is the thing that mediates reduction in blood sugar, reduction in blood pressure, better intestinal health, better sleep, more vivid dreams. So Clostridium butyricum, very important microbe. I'm very impressed you're fermenting that.
Have you tested it too on yourself?
I did, but only as part of a group of microbes. And it made a delicious yogurt.
Yes, yes. So I cannot tell, did it have particular effect because I consume so many different kinds. But I think it's a good addition.
How was the taste?
Wonderful. Wonderful. And why should we pay attention for particular strain number? Let's say the Gasseri strain, what we use is BNR 17. Why we have to pay attention for that?
Because there are differences among strains. Sometimes strain makes a difference, sometimes it doesn't. So it depends. So for instance, with Lactobacillus reuteri, there's a strain called 30242. And I'm sorry about this. I don't make these numbers up. NCIMB 30242. It's a very popular strain. It's the one used in most probiotics, and it does not produce a bacteriocin. So it's useless. If part of your goal is to get rid of SIBO, it's useless. It doesn't do it because it doesn't produce bacteriocin. So you want to choose strains that have been shown to produce bacteriocin. So the strain that we've studied in mice and in humans produces bacteriocins. There's some others. Now, there's no way for people to make that unless you want to read the scientific literature and go through painful mountains of data. So what you have to do is pay attention, I hope, to people like you and me who do pay attention to these things and say, okay, we chose a strain of Lactobacillus crispatus for vaginal and reproductive health, and we made sure that it produces lactic acid that acidifies the vagina and produces bacteriocins to prevent Candida vaginitis and E. coli vaginitis and colonize the bladder. So we choose microbes for a specific effect. Not all crispatus strains do that. So we pick the strains for the effects we want.
Yeah, crispatus, is it V88? What's the strain for crispatus?
Yeah, I think it's LBV88. I think that's one of the strains that works.
Yes. And what are important foods to support microbiome? What should we eat? What should we leave out?
So it's really a return to the way humans ate 12,000 years ago. You know, there's a specific style of eating programmed into our genetic code. What if your listeners were in Africa and they saw a lion kill a wildebeest and tear open its abdomen and chest and eat the heart and the intestines, and your listeners say, that's disgusting. We're going to put that lion in a cage and feed it kale and broccoli. What's going to happen to the lion? It's going to die, probably in a few weeks. In other words, there's a very specific style of eating programmed into that creature's genetic code. It's true for lions, it's true for frogs, it's true for trout, it's true for dolphins, and it's true for humans. But because we've been so distanced, especially in the US, from producing our own food, we think that going to the grocery store that's not producing food.
No.
We don't grow our food, we don't raise livestock anymore, no one wants to milk cows, no one's butchering rabbits. So
I went to butchering class because I wanted to have hands-on experience.
You're way in the lead, way ahead of most people. But it's a return to something close to, maybe you don't have to kill your own rabbits or shoot deer, but something close to that. It means rejecting processed, ultra-processed foods. It also means rejecting ridiculous dietary guidelines that serve the purposes of the food and agribusiness industry. They don't serve your purpose. In the US, it's very bad because the USDA and the US Department of Health and Human Services are the people who craft the food guidelines, like the food pyramid, food plate. They are charged with protecting agribusiness, not the public. So they give us advice that protects Syngenta, BASF, Monsanto, the big companies. They're not created for you. And yet people don't know that. And they get told ridiculous things like cut your saturated fat and total fat, eat more healthy whole grains, everything in moderation. I don't know if you know this, everything in moderation comes from the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics in the US, funded by Coca-Cola and PepsiCo. Because what they want people to believe is, oh, you go ahead and have that can of Coca-Cola. You might have to exercise another 30 minutes to compensate for the extra calories, which is completely absurd. You cannot undo the adverse effects of the ingredients in Coca-Cola by exercise. You can't do it. You cannot. It's like saying you have a little cancer. Exercise 30 minutes. It'll get rid of the cancer. No, it doesn't get rid of the cancer. You cannot undo the adverse effects of the ingredients in something like Coca-Cola by exercising 30 minutes. Yet the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, the organization that is charged with certifying dietitians and nutritionists, propagates that kind of fiction. That's the program. That's the misinformation that we're subjected to in the U.S.
Yes. Yes. So it's difficult to make a choice what to eat. There's so much confusing information.
Well, as you know, it's easier for you because you can grow your own food. You can go to a butcher and just get some organs and some meat. It's just a return to real food. It's crazy, isn't it? People have forgotten what real food is. They have really crazy ideas. Like I saw this happen recently. A woman said to the waiter, no dairy in my food, please. He said, okay, no problem. So no cheese, right? No cream. Okay. It comes and had eggs in it. He said, I told you no dairy. He says, there's no dairy. She says, there's eggs. Eggs are sold in the dairy aisle.
Touch with food.
She thought eggs were dairy food. But this is, it's kind of funny, but it reflects the deep ignorance that Americans especially, much more so than Europe, the deep ignorance people have because they think that food in a drive-through lane or delivered in a clamshell by calling Uber, that's their diet, which is garbage. It's nonsense, of course. And so trying to get people back, you know this, it's going to take several generations to undo this huge mess.
Some people no longer even know how to crack the egg. It's true. They lost touch. They don't know. Now you can buy egg whites in a carton, and that's fine. It's easy. You don't have to crack the eggs.
Your great grandma, no one had to tell her how to eat. She knew how to eat. If she killed a chicken, defeathered it, chopped its head off, used all the organs, used the skin, used the spleen, the kidneys, the liver, the heart. That's how, and you make soups or broths out of it. And you eat everything. You don't throw things away. Boneless, skinless chicken breast? What are you kidding me? They've thrown away the good parts or give to dogs and cats, right?
Yes. And I was wondering, we have bad bacteria. Does bad bacteria has any good function? Nothing is random. So we call it bad, but does it have any positive effects?
You open a really thorny question. But you're probably right that there's a role for mostly proteobacteria. Those are species like E. coli, Klebsiella, and Pseudomonas, all those guys.
Why do we know? What's the function?
Yes. Probably balance. So even those bad microbes have metabolites that are beneficial for you. The problem comes when they overproliferate. So, here's a thorny question. If the microbiome, gastrointestinal, has been characterized in people like the Hadza in Tanzania, or the Maasai in Kenya, or the people of Malawi, southeastern Africa, or people living in the jungles of New Guinea, or the Yanomami in the Brazilian and Venezuelan rainforests, their microbiomes have been studied. And they have very different microbiomes but they still have those bad microbes, the proteobacteria, as well as Staphylococcus, Streptococcus, and Enterococcus. Now, of course, the interesting thing is those populations who don't communicate with each other, they're thousands of miles away across oceans, they have very similar microbiomes. That is, the microbiome unexposed to antibiotics and other modern factors. So the presumption is they have what we could call Stone Age microbiome. Should we mimic that? Should we try to get the microbiomes of those people? Well, maybe. Now, maybe some of the things we've experienced are also adaptive to modern life and maybe good for us. So it's not like everything we have is bad, but it's an open question. Should we mimic the microbiomes? But there's a whole bunch of lessons to be drawn from them. For
I wonder if
instance,
you tested.
Here's an observation for you. So there's a lot of talk nowadays about intestinal methanogen overgrowth. So that's an overgrowth of methane-producing species like Methanobrevibacter smithii. Now, in the modern world, people who have constipation often have an overgrowth of these methanogens, intestinal methanogen overgrowth, IMO. Well, now wait a minute here. How about we look at the microbiomes of those people, those indigenous hunter-gatherer populations? They have more methanogens than we do, yet they have no constipation. So is the problem methanogen overgrowth, or is it the context, the overall ecosystem they occur in? I think that's where that's going. But the point is, there's a lot of things here that are just starting to be clarified. And should we mimic the microbiomes of those people? Not quite clear. For instance, they have a bunch of spirochetes. We don't really have spirochetes. We have rare spirochetes, like the one that causes syphilis. So it's an open question whether how closely we should mimic the microbiomes of those populations.
Yeah, I wonder, are there any tests done on that department?
So you could compare, so if you had an analysis done, you could compare yours to some of the data in studies of those populations, and you will see they have more Prevotella, they have more spirochetes, they have more methanogens, they do have a lot of proteobacteria. That's another curiosity here. We tend to have a lack of Faecalibacterium, Akkermansia, Ruminicaceae, Lactospiraceae, Lactobacillus, Bifidobacteria. So there are stark differences, but it's not quite clear how far we should go in mimicking their microbiome. I'd love to see somebody commercialize, by the way, the microbes unique to those indigenous populations and sell it to us as a probiotic and see what happens. But no one's done that yet.
I think if we would live with us, our microbiome would change.
If what?
If we would live in indigenous people, our microbiome would change too.
Absolutely. No question. Absolutely. You're exactly right. You do mimic the microbiomes of the people you spend a lot of time with. That's exactly right.
And we always affect each other with our microbiota. You enter to somebody's house, you enter into the microbiota.
Yes. Isn't that interesting?
We inhale each other.
And contact each other. You hold hands or you kiss or you hug or whatever. You just shared a bunch of microbes, which is wonderful and scary at the same time. You know, the oral microbiome is something that needs to be better studied, but it is a source. You give your microbes to your partner and they give it to you. And maybe they're good, maybe they're not.
When I moved to this new house, when I made yogurt in Chicago, it never ever got moldy, but it got moldy in this house because I guess the previous people, they had different microbiota than what I had in Chicago. And it took, I had to try a few times, and then I guess I enriched my house with my microbiota, and now it's always perfect, no more mold. But first few times, I was quite surprised.
Very interesting. That's so interesting, Mike.
Yes. And do you know, is there any research? Does Reuteri reduce cancer cells?
There's only kind of cell culture and mouse data. That's actually where a lot of this got started. There was a cancer research group at Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT, about a decade ago. And they knew that Reuteri has been shown to kill colon cancer cells. So they were studying this effect and gave it to mice, likely to see if they could provoke cancer or prevent it. Well, that's when they noticed that the mice changed. They noticed that their hair become, as they described it, rich and luxuriant within a few days. They noticed that if they inflicted any kind of skin wounds, they healed in half the time. They did a really cool experiment. They gave two groups of mice a crappy diet, a diet meant to mimic fast food, a lot of white flour, hydrogenated fats, sugar, that kind of stuff. So both groups of mice given a terrible diet. One group given Reuteri, other group no Reuteri. And the group that didn't get Reuteri got fat and old, lost their hair, stopped mating. They got old and fat and died. The group that got Reuteri stayed slender, played with each other, mating. They stayed slender and youthful until they died. So and that's what we're seeing in humans, that we stay slender, youthful, involved, vigorous, riding your bike, going for walks, curiosity, exploring new ideas, meeting new people. You're gonna die. We all die, right? But you don't get fat, old, and debilitated, and become dependent on your nursing home or something like that. So I think we're seeing this play out in humans, but it all got started with cancer research.
Yes. And I have a question. Could we have too much good bacteria? Like, could we consume too much yogurt or too many capsules?
I've never seen it. I think because we have hundreds of trillions of microbes in our GI tract, and we add what seems like a lot, a few hundred billion, but that's 1,000th of what's already there. So one of the effects I've eaten as much as 3 trillion Reuteri, and I didn't get any additional effects, nor did I get any adverse effects. So 3 trillion. That's just my own experience. But I've never seen anybody overdo it. If you have a normal immune system.
Let's say we overdo it. Could potential side effects be like endotoxemia? Too much bad bacteria gonna die all at once, or?
We're seeing the exact opposite. We're seeing elimination of endotoxemia. So we need more studies. And that's one of the things we're going to be doing. And by the way, in all our future studies, we're going to be instituting questionnaires on measures of well-being, because I think that's better skin. Great, right? More return of youthful musculature. Great, right? All that stuff. But I think one of the best things that you and I are accomplishing is the restoration of generosity, empathy, and acceptance of other people's opinions, the social impact. So every clinical trial from here on in, we're going to make measures of well-being and sociability. How happy are you with where you are in your life? How happy are you with your relationships? How happy are you with yourself? Those kinds of things. That's because, as you see, that's what we're seeing. But we need to formally quantify it. No one has yet done that.
I totally noticed those effects. I feel also my intuition got so much better. I don't have to think, I just feel it. And usually I'm right. And I don't worry as much. I never was a big worrier to begin with, but I just worry even less now. And I do like people better. And I'm way more tolerant, way more patient.
What else have you noticed, Mike?
Um, mm, First thing was, yeah, my hair started growing back. Uh, I had like a joint pain on the knees that faded away, and I had like skin blemishes. These are gone, and digestion got better. And overall, I feel like so much lighter and better. It's like totally different life, and the social effect that's really good too, and more optimistic and on a better mood.
Have you experienced any changes in skin?
My skin was pretty good even before, but now it's much better.
How about sleep?
Fantastic. I fall asleep easily, and I need way less sleep. When I went to work, then I needed alarm clock. Now, and when I started using Reuteri, then I didn't need alarm clock. And now I usually go to sleep maybe 11, 12, and I start waking up like 4:30. I need way less sleep too.
Interesting. Very interesting. How about dreams?
Way more vivid. I don't remember my dreams. Very rarely when I remember, but more vivid. That I noticed too.
One thing we haven't talked about is a lot of people use these actigraphic devices. These are devices like the Aura Ring or Apple Watch or Fitbit that indirectly track your sleep phases. And people are reporting extended REM.
Oh,
REM,
I
of
tested
course.
that. Before I moved back to Estonia, it was stressful, all this unknowingness, and I lost my good sleep. And then I thought, I will test that simple slumber, the Biotiquest product. But I wanted to see on device. So I got device that measures your, like something, we put it around the wrist. And first night, my REM sleep was 30 minutes. Then I took a simple slumber and it started to increase. Then it was 50 minutes, then it was hour and 20 minutes. And every day the REM sleep got longer and longer and longer in very short time, in a few days.
Fantastic.
Really fast.
Fantastic. And of course, that translates to not just increased alertness and ability to concentrate, also better mood and better metabolic health. That's an extremely powerful effect we haven't talked enough about lately.
Yes. And could we talk about blood sugar and A1C and why A1C is very important? I did a test before started Reuteri. My A1C was not good, was 5.8, and now it's 5.1. But I know you suggest it shouldn't be more than 5, and why is so?
Well, I should remind everybody, so getting Rotary is very powerful, but it's even more powerful in the context of a better program, better diet. So what we do is, of course, no wheat, grains, or sugars, because they cause heart disease and dementia. So the diet advocated by the U.S. government causes diabetes, weight gain, and dementia, and heart disease. So no wheat, grains, or sugars, and then address those common nutrient deficiencies because of the quirks of modern life: omega-3 fatty acids, magnesium, iodine, vitamin D. For instance, magnesium. We should get magnesium from drinking from a river, but we can't. The water's filthy now. It's got sewage. It's got farm runoff. It's got industrial runoff. So we have to filter our water that removes all magnesium. And of course, we don't eat wild plants anymore. We eat cultivated plants that have very little magnesium. So we have to get magnesium. So these are not nutrients just to take nutrients. They're meant to compensate for the deficiencies of modern life. And then we address the microbiome. And part of addressing the microbiome is restoration of Rotary and those other microbes. So I want to point out that, yeah, getting Rotary is extremely powerful, but it's even more powerful in the context of that very simple program for overall health, because that's what reduces the hemoglobin A1C, not just the Rotary. It's in the context of all the. So, as you point out, hemoglobin A1C it's a measure of glycated hemoglobin.
Yeah, why
Glucose.
glycation is bad?
Pardon me?
What does it do, the glycation, when the blood sugar is too high, when the A1C is too high? What does the glycation do?
So it irreversibly binds to hemoglobin in red blood cells. It also binds other proteins also. So every time your blood glucose goes above 100 or 5.5 millimolar, you react with the proteins of the body. So let's say it reacts with the collagen in your skin, because collagen is very glycation prone. You get thinning of the skin, of the collagen layer, and you get wrinkles. What if you glycate the collagen in your joints, like your knees and hips? Well, the cartilage breaks down and you over time lead to bone-on-bone arthritis. So glycation is part of aging, and you can age faster when you have a high blood glucose. And that's reflected by higher hemoglobin A1C, glycated hemoglobin. So there's no level of hemoglobin A1C where glycation completely stops, but you can minimize it by getting it to about 5.0% or less. Now, if you go to the doctor, he says, "Oh, Jane, your hemoglobin A1C is 5.7%. You're okay."
Yeah,
No,
that's
you're not.
the number for the system. Yeah.
Why would they say something so stupid? Well, what they're saying is you don't yet need insulin or diabetes drugs. You must therefore be okay, which of course is ridiculous. At a hemoglobin A1C of 5.7%, you're aging much faster than you should. Your joints are deteriorating. Your skin is undergoing accelerated aging. You're more likely to have cataracts, glycation of lens proteins. You're more likely to develop kidney disease. You're more likely to have heart disease. There's about a 300% increase in death from heart disease at that level. In other words, so once again, conventional healthcare is awful if you want health. They're there if you need insulin. But if you don't need insulin or drugs, they're not there to help you. So at what level of hemoglobin A1C does all this stuff come to a halt, or at least is minimized? 5.0, actually 4.9% or less. But just to make it easy to remember, 5.0% or less. And by the way, people doing this program, the things I've talked about, the diet, nutrients, microbiome, etc., typically have hemoglobin A1C of about 4.6, 4.7. So we've minimized the rate of aging, the deterioration of your lenses, of your joint cartilage, of your skin.
Yes. And why it's important to monitor the blood sugar? I know you recommending like blood sugar should be between 70 and 90. Why is that important?
Same reasons. You don't want glycation to occur. Um, Also, you don't want insulin resistance to develop. That is, let's say you had oatmeal or banana, all the foods that raise blood glucose to like 150 milligrams or like 8 millimolar. That's when you not only get glycation, extravagant glycation. Remember, glycation is irreversible. You cannot undo it. But you also get insulin resistance. That is, your body's inability, muscle, brain, liver, to respond to insulin that your pancreas compensates for by producing huge amounts of insulin, tenfold more, 100-fold more insulin that causes weight gain in the abdomen, leads to heart disease, risk for dementia, multiple forms of cancer. So we don't want insulin resistance. Yet 2/3 of the US population, my 2/3 of the US population has insulin resistance and are on their way to heart disease, dementia, cancer, etc. I mean, it's no wonder, right, that we have deteriorating health nationwide.
Yes. I started using the glucose monitor. That gives very good idea what's going on in your body. I really recommend that for people who get started, who eliminate wheat, and they can test it and they can see how it affects. I did a test. My friend asked me to test with the rice because she heard when rice is cold and you eat it with a fat, it won't have, it won't raise your blood sugar that as much. It did raise my blood sugar, and it took 8 days before it went back to normal. It went shoot up, shoot down. It was 8 days. So even that cold rice and fat did not help.
You know, I often say half my job is batting down misinformation like that. There are people, for one reason or another, misunderstanding, ignorance, getting attention, clickbait, all these reasons that there's so much misinformation out there like that. That's called retrogradation. And retrogradation, that is the reversion of sugars back into fibers. Fibers are polymers of sugar, is a minor effect. It hardly happens at all, but people have thought that meant that having cold rice was a good thing. As you know, it's not.
Yes. And should people worry about, because many people do worry about cholesterol and fat, should they worry about it?
No, what I tell people is when you have your cholesterol panel, go get a big fat black magic marker and cross it out. It's meaningless. It has no bearing on heart disease. That is a misinterpretation of science, woefully outdated science from the 1950s and 1960s from the NIH in the US, where they wanted a way to count the particles, the lipoproteins, the fat-carrying proteins in the bloodstream that cause heart disease. Well, how do you do that in 1958? They didn't know how to do it. So they did this. They spun the clear part of blood, the plasma, down in a centrifuge, and you get layers. A high density layer goes to the bottom, low density layer, very low, just like salad dressing. You have separation. Well, how do you count the particles in each layer? Not easy in 1958. So they said, let's take one component of lipoproteins, because there are multiple ingredients in these lipoproteins. We could measure triglycerides in each layer. We could measure a protein like apoprotein B in each layer. Let's measure cholesterol. So they used cholesterol to guesstimate the number of particles in the high density layer, low density layer, etc. Well, people interpreted that to mean that cholesterol was the cause of heart disease. It has nothing to do with the cause of heart disease. It was meant to be a crude, indirect marker for the particles that do cause heart disease. So that 50, 60-year-old idea persists, mostly because the pharmaceutical industry found a way to make hundreds of billions of dollars by exploiting it. So to this day, your general practitioner, even your cardiologist, says really stupid things. Like, we're going to reduce your LDL cholesterol. It has nothing to do with. That's why in the US, 80 million Americans take statin cholesterol drugs, and it has not resulted in a reduction in heart disease. And that's why, like in suburban Chicago, your local hospital probably added an $80 million wing for cardiac care because it continues to be the number one moneymaker for the healthcare system. So I can tell you, a lot of my colleagues silently think, why would we prevent heart disease? It pays so well. So now that's the sad part. The good part is identifying the causes of heart disease and correcting them is so easy. It's so easy. Why, you can do it almost for free, but it involves no drugs, does not involve anything about cholesterol, has nothing to do with saturated fat. So that's the hardest part. We have to unlearn all the misinformation we've been given over the last, 60 plus years. And you can have enormous control over risk for heart disease by doing what? Eating no wheat, grains, or sugars that provoke formation of small LDL particles, the real cause for heart disease, and doesn't cause insulin resistance that amplifies that particle. We get like vitamin D, major contributor to cardiovascular health. Omega-3 fatty acids, we now know with good science, after 20 years of misinformation and uncertainty, we know that omega-3 fatty acids are critical and in fact facilitate reversal or regression of coronary atherosclerotic plaque. And then, of course, addressing the microbiome, especially SIBO and endotoxemia, because if you have any sign of coronary disease, heart attack, stent implantation, sudden cardiac death survivor, or had a positive calcium score by a CT heart scan, you have endotoxemia, and that is a major risk factor for heart disease. So just addressing those handful of things, and we see people's coronary disease regress all the time.
Yes. And what would be most important test for heart disease?
Well, for risks for things that lead to heart disease, if you want to know if you have anything like that, you need a lipoprotein test, not a lipid or cholesterol test, but a lipoprotein test. The most common, there have been a number of ways to do that over the years, but the most accessible nowadays is NMR, nuclear magnetic resonance, NMR lipoprotein analysis. The first time you do it, you want to include a lipoprotein A, which is a genetic pattern. We also get thyroid measures, a TSH, free T3, free T4, reverse T3, and thyroid antibodies, because even a little bit of thyroid dysfunction is a cardiac risk factor. Optionally, you can check your omega-3 index, RBC omega-3 index, and try to keep it above 10%. But that's optional, only because we know if you get the recommended intake of omega-3s, which I would say is 3,600 milligrams EPA DHA per day, You almost always have an RBC omega-3 index of 10% or greater, the level at which you have minimized risk for heart disease, in fact, encourage regression or reversal, and protect yourself from dementia.
And
And
how about
then,
the coronary calcium score?
and then a CT heart scan for a coronary calcium score. So normal is 0. Anything above 0 is abnormal. So here's something for your listeners to know. Let's say your score is 400, which would be very high. What if you did nothing? How fast will it increase? 25% per year. So a year later, 500, another year, 625. And of course, you're getting closer and closer. So a score of 400, you're about 7 to 8 years away from dying, having a heart attack, or needing a procedure like stent implantation or bypass surgery. What if you take a high dose of Lipitor, cholesterol drug, follow a low-fat, low-saturated fat diet, take a baby aspirin, and exercise? How fast will the score go up? 25% per year. It does nothing. Addressing cholesterol achieves nothing. So what if you eliminate wheat grains and sugars, therefore the factors that provoke small LDL particles, address those common nutrient deficiencies, omega-3 fatty acids, magnesium, iodine, vitamin D. You minimize insulin resistance, and you address the microbiome, SIBO, endotoxemia. And we do so, by the way, with that SIBO yogurt recipe. And we're seeing cardiac calcium scores of 400 drop to 240 or something like that. Or at the very least, stop going up. So, and we did nothing to reduce cholesterol. We did not limit saturated fat. We did not reduce total fat. So it's really very simple, Mai. And of course, you lose weight, your blood pressure normalizes, your skin is better, and all the other benefits that come from this entire program that includes Reuteri and other microbes.
So should people be afraid of animal fats, like many are?
No. So, one thing for your listeners to know, Mai, is a lot of that advice came from garbage studies. So I say, Mai, what did you eat for breakfast on Monday? You say, I had a bowl of oatmeal and skim milk. Not you, of course, just talking. And skim milk and a banana. What'd you have for lunch? Oh, I had a rye sandwich with ham and mustard. What'd you have for dinner? Okay. We do that over 5 days. I contact you in 10 years. I say, Mike, did you have do you have heart disease? Have you had colon cancer? What's happened to you? Okay. And we try to associate what you ate in those 5 days with your health 10 years later. Now, wait a minute. In those 10 years, you got divorced. You drank too much for 2 years. You went on a retreat, or you went on a all-inclusive vacation in Mexico, and you gained 25 pounds. In other words, all kinds of things happen to people. You went on a fast. You're trying to tell me the questionnaire from 10 years ago predicts health? Of course not. Yet that's the basis for all dietary guidelines. That fairy tale is the basis for all dietary guidelines. It's nonsense. And so that's why we ignore dietary guidelines. We ignore the USDA. We ignore the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. We ignore what the dietitians tell us. And of course, a lot of that advice is colored by Coca-Cola, PepsiCo, Nabisco, General Mills, Nestle, all those big companies who have great influence because they have a lot of money. So we have to plug our ears, right? We have to just say, well, how did humans survive for the first, several thousand generations where there was no diabetes, there was no coronary disease, there was no dementia. Cancer was very rare. There was almost no arthritis. There was injury and infection. You fall off a cliff, you fall out of a tree, a wolf bites you, things like that. But there's no acne, there's no rosacea, there's no psoriasis. Strokes are unheard of. There's no constipation, there's no ulcerative colitis, there's no hemorrhoids, there's no colon cancer. And so we can learn from those experiences, but that we try to mimic the diet that primitive humans originally had, that is programmed into your genetic code.
Right. Yes. And I wonder what you would suggest when people travel. How do they support microbiome while traveling? They cannot make yogurt while they're traveling.
I don't have all the answers, but I can tell what I do. So as soon as I get someplace, I go to the store and I'll buy whatever I can that's fermented. So like kombucha, kefirs, commercial kefirs, but I'll leave it on the counter of the hotel for a few days, let it ferment further. Now, I'd like to get more rotari. So I one of the reasons I created capsule products for rotari is because of travel. So that's why I created the My Rotari and Gut to Glow, for instance. And you can take those capsules. What I do is I empty it into that commercial kefir. And then I take the kefir. You know how most hotels have an ice bucket?
Right.
I take the ice bucket, fill it with warm water, not hot water, but warm water. And then I put that container of kefir in the warm water and then cover it with a towel or something. Try to keep it warm for as long as possible. And do that every 6 hours or so. And that way you get some rotari added to the kefir. And you get higher counts of bacteria. So I'll do things like that. And it seems to have worked. One of my challenges, I have a daughter who's a professional tennis player, and she needs to address her microbiome. And by the way, athletes can get advantage with some of these strategies. Well, she's traveling. She's in Paris, Rome, Melbourne, Sydney, all over the place. And it's hard she can't bring her yogurt maker, obviously. So I've taught her these kind of little tricks to make sure she's getting microbes when she's on the road.
Right, right. Or use capsules. I have your new
Yes.
product here too. This one, brand new. The one.
Oh, yes, yes, yeah. Rotary Biotic. Yes.
Yes. So these are good, strong capsules. Like one has 10 billion, one capsule has 10 billion CFUs. And what's the difference? Let's say BioGaia, Reuteri, and this. What's the difference with your product and the BioGaia?
Well, our strain. So we've tested in animals, we've tested in humans, and it provides the effects you want. So I did compare it side by side to 6475, the BioGaia strain, and we couldn't tell any difference. Now, we're going to continue those. So there's about 200 known strains of rotari. Is this one the best? We don't know. No one knows. So over time, as budget permits, we'll try to compare the various. I don't know if we'll do all 200, but maybe we do, I don't know, 25 or 50 and see if one is better for specific effects, such as provocation, pardon me, of oxytocin. And there's other things we want to explore also. Are there things that add to the effect of rotari? So, for instance, let's take the oxytocin effect. What else provokes oxytocin? Well, you could hug your dog, your cat, but you can't do that every 3 seconds, right? uh, uh, the endocannabinoid, oleoyl ethanolamide, OEA. It sounds like cannabis. It's not cannabis. It just happens to overlap in some of the pathways that are involved in the intestinal barrier. So that endocannabinoid, unrelated to cannabis, also provokes oxytocin. So I want to know if we add OEA to rotari, does it amplify the effect? I don't think it does, but it'll be interesting to know. What's the consortium or community of microbes that maybe makes rotari more effective? Don't know. That's a tough one. So there's a whole bunch of things here we need to explore. It just takes time and money to do it.
Yes. Yeah, I really like that one because it's 10 billion each capsule and easy to travel with that. And yeah, I think the BioGaia has 100 million each tablet, so it's quite weak compared to that.
So if we're going to make yogurt, so we used to take 10 BioGaia tablets and crush them. And sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't, because I don't think the tablets are a good way to put microbes. So with the Rotary Biotic, you can take one capsule and it makes the yogurt consistently. As a general rule for your listeners, it takes about 2 billion microbes to confidently get started to make yogurt. So that's why we had to crush 10 tablets. Each one had 100 million of two strains, 6475 and 17938. So 100 million, 10 tablets, and that's when you got fermentation. Now with 10 or 20 billion of the Reuteri biotic, you just need one capsule. You don't even need a half a capsule actually, but just for ease.
Why did you change the name from My Reuteri?
So My Reuteri is a consumer brand. Reuteri biotic is a professional health coach, physician, etc. brand. Just two different lines, but they're the same. They're the same. They're the same line.
Yes. And then, would you like to tell about your inner circle and your website? I've been a member of Inner Circle about in June. It's going to be 3 years. I can tell it's so much useful information, but you do not find on a Google. Never.
Nice to hear, mate. Thank you.
I love the Zoom meetings. It's just the time difference now. 3 a.m. in Estonia when it's 7 in Chicago. I tried to make it a couple times. I just cannot wake up at 3 yet.
I was impressed that you did. So what Mai's talking about is my awkwardly named inner circle drdavisinfinitehealth.com. So that's a membership website where there's all kinds, there's hundreds of videos, there's hundreds of thousands of discussion posts in the forum. There's tons of written material, and we have an AI platform where it answers questions for you, as well as humans there also. We have humans behind it too. But one of the things we do is this. About once a week, we meet for a couple of hours.
That was my favorite part, yes.
Well,
so many questions.
It's 7 p.m. Central Time, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, and what's that, 3 a.m. Estonian time. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's when you have a worldwide audience, it's very difficult to accommodate people, in Australia or Asia or India. But it's happening. So we do record a lot of it. So in case you can't make it, a lot of the presentations, a lot of the interviews are recorded, so you don't miss out on everything. But that's the innercircle.drdavisinfinitehealth.com. If somebody doesn't want to join a website, there's my blog, williamdavismd.com. Thousands of blog posts. I have a podcast, Defiant Health, a podcast. I have several hundred videos on YouTube. So trying to, as much as we can, try to propagate this message because it's not coming from the doctors nor the healthcare system.
Right. And on the Inner Circle, I think there's some articles are for free and some videos are for free too to watch.
Yeah. This stuff costs money. People think that the internet's free. It's not free.
I think it's really good investment. I don't know, it's like $25 a month, but you get incredible knowledge from there, and you can put your test results, and then they advise you, and whatever issue you have, you get a really good, insightful answers. And the Facebook group is good too.
That's right. There's also a private Facebook page. That's right. Yeah.
Yes. And yeah,
good to hear, Mike.
Yeah. And thank you so much for your work. I think you deserve Nobel Prize because you make humankind better, healthier, stronger.
Well, thank you.
And I hope I catch you sometimes on the Inner Circle.
I hope so too.
Earlier. I started new ferment today. I collected in Chicago area too. Wild ramps, and I have this green one there is huge. So I have like 10 liters of ramps now. First time fermenting, but I'm thinking why it shouldn't work. Yes,
I've never done it.
Big amount. I want to store it for a winter, and I think it works. I'll let you know.
Great. Yeah, let us know. Because you're doing a lot of new things that even I haven't done.
I like to test. I even tested. I fermented liver and ground beef, but with very specific bacteria, Koichi, Aspergillus oryza. You can only do it with that, not just salt and water. That wouldn't work.
Very nice, Mike.
And thank you so much. And I hope
thank you, Mike.
Soon.
I'm glad Estonia worked out for you.
I love it. You must come visit. You're eating good here.
I'd love to.
See you soon.
Thanks, Mai.
Bye.